Passing. It's something a lot of cis or non-transgender folks might not think about or even be familiar with, but it can be crucial for those under the trans umbrella. Passing, as the word is used in the trans community, is the concept of being seen and accepted as one's gender, as if one were cis or assigned that gender at birth. This is especially while interacting with people. This can be that a trans guy comes off as a man when seen at the grocery store due to his appearance. This could be that a trans woman is automatically addressed as a woman when ordering takeout on the phone. It could, though perhaps a bit rarer, be that a non-binary person was not perceived as a man or woman, but perhaps as neither or a mix of both at their job. To put it simply, it's that a person is able to be seen as their gender without a hassle or insistence upon being seen the right way. Now, you may have heard me say that it is rarer for a non-binary person to pass. From what I've heard when in discussion with other non-binary folks, it can be a rare thing to pass as non-binary, and it's often a topic of discussion as how does one pass as non-binary? It's not as simple as having a transition goal to be seen as non-binary. A woman is often recognized with certain characteristics, as having breasts, maybe even long hair, a slightly higher voice, and wearing makeup, skirts, or dresses. A man can be recognized by having a fairly flat chest, a lower voice, and perhaps having facial hair, wearing pants, and perhaps a nice shirt with a tie, just to sum things up by common traits. Of course, these people can be men or women without these things, but these are often visual and auditory indications to a majority of people, at least in the West. Secondary sex characteristics such as one's appearance can be altered by hormone replacement therapy or by having other gender-affirming treatments like surgery. What do you think about when you think of non-binary? In film, Enbys are often portrayed as at least attempting to tip the gender scale towards androgyny. How do we do that? I feel like most folks would say that by donning a combination of things that mix together the feminine and the masculine, like a skirt with a button-down shirt and tie, or having a mustache while wearing makeup, one might be seen as non-binary. There is not always as clear of an end goal when seeking gender-affirming care, such as HRT. This can sometimes make it more difficult to get such care, as often non-cisgender people are seen to be only binary trans and looking to tip the scale in the complete opposite direction rather than be a sort of mix of both or neither, as this can often be a non-binary person's transition goal. One can't be tipping the scale towards a more binary look. Everyone can make their own decisions and have their own goals for an ideal transition, after all. But let's be real. There isn't a particular way that non-binary people are expected to look, or that a lot of societies recognize as singularly non-binary, as they would with the two binary genders of male and female. This lack of ways to portray and help people recognize non-binary folks through tropes and recognized ways of dressing makes passing as a non-binary person difficult. This can also be difficult because non-binary in itself is an umbrella term. You can watch my video on that linked below. It's not just that one doesn't identify as solely a man or a woman. It can be that one identifies as another gender, that one identifies as both a man and a woman, or perhaps that they identify with no gender at all. With this in mind, it's hard to put together a non-binary look that represents this group of people, as there might be a look for a woman or a man, as discussed earlier. It can also be hard when one wants to transition medically. It's hard to know where the stopping point is, as the goalposts aren't exactly at a standard place, as they might be when transitioning as a binary man or woman. What does an androgynous voice sound like? At this point, I think it's different for every person. We already went over the lack of standard for non-binary appearance, which can include a lack of standards for non-binary people's secondary sex characteristics as well. Does a non-binary person on average have breasts? Does a non-binary person have facial hair? Of course, there's the famous transphobic obsession with what somebody has downstairs as well. There's not a standard there either, despite my and many other folks' frustrated insistence that clothing is literally just cloth and doesn't or shouldn't belong to one particular gender. Clothing sections are also still very gendered in a binary sense. Also, despite wearing a selection of clothing from any clothing section, nothing is seen as particularly non-binary, as might be seen with, again, binary trans people or binary genders. It's frustrating. This isn't to say that there isn't difficulty in passing as a binary trans woman, or even as a binary trans man. There's a lot of difficulty in being recognized as one's gender right off the bat. However, there is a lot of flexibility when it comes to gender expression. It isn't explicitly a good or bad thing, but more of a mixed bag. There have been studies that show the difficulty and discrimination faced by non-binary folks, and even by binary trans folks when it comes to passing, which I'll leave below. The idea of passing can be amazing. Always being seen as who you are, as though you were cisgender. However, it's not an easy thing to obtain, no matter where you fall under the trans umbrella. Whether passing as a trans woman or a trans man, that often means taking the norms of gender to the extremes. A trans woman will dress and be hyper-feminine, and a trans man will be dressed and be hyper-masculine. When that hypergender isn't a constant, there's a sort of double standard present, that one isn't really one's gender due to this hypergender not always happening, despite cis people not always having to perform as a hypergendered version of themselves. This scrutiny around presenting as one's gender has led to a lot of trouble and difficulty, even with cisgender people. The term and act of transvestigation comes to mind, where transphobes try to explain why a person is actually transgender. This leads to people that are not transgender being put under fire because transphobes' one mission in life is to make transgender people miserable, no matter the cost to everyone else. This investigation of trans people has also led to the much talked about bathroom police, wherein people who do not appear to be their gender are not allowed to use a public bathroom. This has caused issue not only for trans people, but many cisgender folks that may appear to be slightly more masculine or feminine, thus being mistaken to be transgender. It's just a lose-lose situation. This has also led to a lot of controversy in sports circles, where more masculine women, often more than feminine men, are thought to be transgender. This has also led to testing of hormones that has disqualified cisgender people from sports competitions under the guise of preventing transgender people from competing. Passing is so subjective. If someone looks hard enough for things that everyone has, and that is unique to them, such as particular bone structure, which can be highlighted or hidden based on something like makeup, anyone can look transgender, whether they are or not. Gender presentation isn't always black or white. It's often some different shade of gray. And believe me, there's a lot of shades of gray out there. All this to say, passing can have a lot to do with performing hypergendered versions of femininity and or masculinity. This can lead to a lot of difficulty in passing, no matter how a transgender person identifies, on either side of the binary gender, in the middle, or outside of it. These hyper versions of gender are used as a harsh judgment on transgender people being their real self, which can lead to a lot of toxic ideas about what makes one a particular gender. Of course, this can leave any person under the transgender umbrella in a difficult situation of performing their gender correctly when there may not be any such expectation for cis people. Or, cis people, as we've said, can get caught in the crosshairs. It's all very, very confusing, very sticky, and this is, I'd say, the bad side of passing. There shouldn't need to be an expectation of hypergendering one's presentation in order to appear as one's real gender. It puts negative expectations on, well, everyone, as transphobes especially are scrutinizing every part of every person's presentation, thinking that everybody is or could be transgender until proven otherwise. Again, transvestigation sucks for everyone. Of course, in an ideal world, there wouldn't be this expectation. That may be what is behind passing, but at this point in time, it can cause a lot of harm in the world, as the we can always tell transphobes try to insist people like J.K. Rowling is transgender, and we're in a society where there is way too much hullabaloo over where someone goes to pee under false presumptions that people are predators, when all anyone ever wants to do is pee in peace. Everyone has a common goal: to exist in peace. If you have any other subjects about mental health or LGBTQIA+ topics that you'd like to see covered, please let me know down in the comment section. As always, my resources are listed in the description down below. Thanks for watching the OCD Enby. Stay safe out there.